after many allegations, many talk come out for Rivers State, say nothing like crude production they go on for PH Refinery. NNPC don't bust out, come let us know, say na lie they talk. Say production they go on for the refinery. No say Nigeria don't trust NNPC because they don't promise and face severally. Understand? They don't promise us one time I say deadline of say the refinery will come on stream for so time. When they don't face severally, so Nigeria don't trust them again. So now they struggle to prove point. Say yes, the refinery is on board.
There are many questions about chemical society in terms of what they've been up to over the years. But I think I'm just going to cut to the chase about the Port Harcourt refinery in terms of all the back and forth that's gone on. And sometimes one wonders what goes through the mind of Nigerian engineers. As a matter of fact, there were comments also attributed to those you thought should know. Chemical engineers saying that Port Harcourt refinery, it's not working, things are not going the way it ought to be. And then there were accusations of blending, partly imported products as opposed to refining, and the argument just goes on. Now, you are someone who is well-versed in that industry and beyond. Could you give us your impression of what you make of all of this?
Thank you very much. I am here as the president of the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers, and we are professionals who have worked in this industry for many years. And based on our knowledge, we are able to answer some of those questions. From the beginning, I want to say that there is a deficit of trust that exists right now in our society. And that is the reason, I think, why there is so much doubt about statements being made.
Yeah.
But based on our findings and our contact with our members who are working in this sector, in the refineries included, the old Port Harcourt refinery is actually operating.
It's working?
It's working, yes.
Have your members been there?
Yes, yes. There are actually two refineries in Port Harcourt. There's the old refinery, otherwise called Area 5, and then there's the new refinery, which has areas 1, 2, and 3. There used to be an area 4, but that has been mothballed. So the old refinery, the area 5, is the only one that was commissioned last week. And based on the reports that we have received, we can indeed state that that refinery is running and has been loading out products.
So when you say it's working, could you break it down a little further? What kind of products is he loading? Are they PMS? Are they blending? Are they refining?
That question I need to deal with.
Please.
Because when people ask that question, I get a bit surprised. It reveals a lack of understanding of how the refinery
this is fueled by those who should know.
Yes.
So those who don't actually go, have the picture should be, go with what they see and hear those experts.
So hopefully we can explain that.
That's why you
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
In the refinery, I wish I could take a board and just actually make some sketches for you. Crude oil comes in. It's the feedstock. That's what we call it. And then it comes into the refinery and goes through distillation. It is separated into various products. The crude oil that we all talk about is actually a mixture of very many products, very many things, okay? But in the refinery, what happens is we put it through a column, and then we get out from the top gas. Then we get straight run gasoline. Some people call it light naphtha. Then we get heavy naphtha. Then we get kerosene. Then we get light gas oil. Then we get heavy gas oil. Then we get from the bottom atmospheric residue. These are the intermediate products that come from the crude column. Now, these products go for further processing, okay? And in the old Port Harcourt refinery, there is only one further processing unit, the catalytic reforming unit. That is what produces high-octane stuff. Now, PMS is not a product that comes off the column itself. PMS is a blend. So when you get that light naphtha that I talked about. Then you have heavy naphtha. The heavy naphtha you send to this secondary processing unit called the catalytic reforming unit, and there it is reformed. Why is it necessary to reform it? Your car and my car, we use PMS. That's what we use to run a car, PMS. And PMS is actually about 91 research octane number, run. 91 run, yes. Light naphtha on its own is not good enough to run in your car. So we send the heavy naphtha to this catalytic reforming unit, which boosts the octane to about 95, 96. In the new refinery, we actually have another plant called the FCC. You may have heard about FCC a lot. The FCC is a plant which takes even that heavy gas oil I talked about and the atmospheric residue and transforms them into more gasoline and more diesel.
So it has more capacity than the old one.
Oh, yes. So it does more conversion. And by the time you get this various blend stock, high octane stock, you blend them with the lower octane stock, the light naphtha, to give you PMS. Then the diesel is also a blend of LGO and some stuff from the FCC. Okay? So that is why when people say, are they blending or are they producing? It's a misunderstanding.
Well, I think the question really from critics is the Port Harcourt refinery, and it's a very simple question that they tried to get from the NNPC. Is this a crude oil refining facility or is it a blending facility?
It's a crude oil refining facility. Yes. And when you refine the crude oil, you produce light naphtha, and then you produce, if the CRE is running, you produce reformate, which is high octane stuff. To get your 91 octane, you have to blend light naphtha and the reformate to get 91 run, which goes out as PMS. Okay? Then in the new refinery, you do the same thing. You have more conversion units. The new refinery is a more efficient refinery than the old refinery. The same thing with Dangote. Exactly. If you recall, when Dangote first started operating, they were only selling diesel. The reason is very clear. They had not completed their downstream units, which will give them high octane stuff, which they can blend with the light naphtha, which is the only thing you can produce from the crude distillation unit.
Sorry, could you speak to this, which also circulates out there, but about Dangote refinery? Is it such that his own kind of refinery is that they cannot rely solely on the kind of crude Nigeria produces? They also have to import another kind of blend of crude to blend with ours to produce the final product.
Yeah, the Dangote refinery is a much more modern refinery. So it has been deliberately designed to be able to process different types of crude. That's the advantage it has. I mean, it was just commissioned this year. The old refinery was completed in 1965. The new refinery, we call it new, but it's not that new. It was actually completed in 1989. Kaduna refinery was completed in 1980. So those are relatively old compared with the Dangote refinery. Yeah.
I want to be able to talk a little bit about the future of these refineries in the country, especially because I know you've been one of the proponents for the privatization of a lot of these businesses. Talk to us a bit about that. We heard from, at least from the authorities sometime last week, I think, that the plans are underway, you know, to do that to this sector, to privatize this sector. Talk to us a little bit about that and what the benefits will be. The truth is, when it comes to the oil sector in this country, it is such a murky situation. For many Nigerians, they just throw their hands up in the air and don't really care anymore. But why should it be privatized? Because I know that that's something you've been pushing for.
Yes, indeed. As a society, we have been pushing for privatization of the refineries because that will enable them to function efficiently. There is a lot of quick decisions that need to be made in the refining sector. If you have a refinery running, funny enough, refineries are supposed to be continuously running. They're not supposed to be down. So if you want your refinery to be profitable, it has to be run as a profitable venture. And we would like the government to free the refineries by divesting significant equity of the government holdings. Presently, it's 100% owned by the government. But I think that the refineries will become more efficient if the government divests its equity to below 50%, and then let the 51%, like the NLNG model, let the 51% be held by private sector entities. Then you will see efficiency in the refineries. You will see that Immediately there's a failure in the refinery, a shutdown of a pump, a breakdown of a pump or anything, immediately they will replace it. Right now, NNPC needs to go through a long process. You know, you go through a process internal in NNPC, then you go to the government, you go to CBN, you go to raise letters of credit, and all this is inefficient. Also, we need to attract the best hands into the industry. The petroleum industry is not an emotional industry. I mean, you need to have seasoned, competent persons, and you need to be able to attract them and retain them. So, if the refineries are privatized, that will really enable them to run efficiently. Nigeria LNG is a company which is running very efficiently today. And that is because the government agreed to reduce its equity from the original 100% to 49%. And then 51% was then held by Shell, Total, and Ajib. And you see today, the board of NLNG makes the decisions. And the company and the people working there are free to function in a way that creates maximum value for the country.
The cash cow that this sector is, you honestly think that the Nigerian government is going to agree to remove their hands from it so it can run efficiently?
Can I say something which might shock you? It will actually generate more money for the government than it is doing right now. Because when you privatize and the company functions as a private entity, it yields more revenue. Eleme Petrochemicals is a perfect example of that. Eleme Petrochemicals was not running efficiently until it was privatized. Now, prior to that, there were all sorts of difficulties that NNPC was experiencing in terms of getting approvals for its plans. And that made it inefficient to run. When the decision was taken to privatize it, it immediately freed the company to excel. Within the next year, after it was privatized, the company made a profit of $1.5 billion. And the government got its tax revenue in addition to dividend revenue. And then the state government owns 5% of Eleme Petrochemicals. The community, Eleme community, owns 5%, and they have been so happy with the setup, with the result that they now protect the company. All this, one of the difficulties we are having right now is pipeline vandalization, and so on and so forth. When the communities and the states and the private entities have the stake in what is going on, those pipelines will be protected.
Because I understand a group has also advocated privatization of the pipelines,
yes,
such that they can make it more effective.
Absolutely.
So
that is exactly what we have recommended. In actual fact, there was a national refineries task force that was put together in 2012 of seasoned professionals from across the industry, and they made the same recommendation that not just the refineries, but also the depots and the pipelines be privatized, because that will free these assets. You know, there are 5,000 kilometers of crude pipelines and product pipelines which are not being used efficiently because everybody says government thing is nobody's property. They just treat it anyhow. But if we all see it as our property, you know, and it's a privatized entity, then it will be more efficient and more accountable.
Pardon me to take you back to this Port Harcourt refinery. When your team went there, to what capacity is it functional? And if it eventually gets to 100, what will be the difference from what we have now?
As at the time when it was at about 60%, okay? That is actually because 60% is the minimum turn down at which you can run a refinery efficiently. When it's below 50%, you are struggling. That is why when they first started up, they were struggling until they went up to 60% and then they stabilized. And it's been stable. And then we understand they have gone up to 70%. Their target is 90%. So there will be more product. However, go back to what I talked to you about before, about this issue of high octane stuff and low octane stuff. There is a unit called the catalytic reforming unit, which we understand that they are making plans to begin to bring that unit into function this week. Once that is done, then you will see that the production of PMS will rise, because then they will have enough more high-octane stuff to blend with the light naphtha. Right now, some people were making allegations about a cracked C5 being the only thing that was being. That is because, in actual fact, they were getting cracked C5 from LME Petrochemicals. Remember, NNPC owned LME Petrochemicals when it was built. NNPC owned the refinery. So all these plants were linked, such that the cracked C5, which is something LME does not need, was being sent to the storage. So
not that it was being imported and then doing the final product.
It was being sent to the refinery, from where they could either export it or blend it with the refinery's production.
Because that was the issue. People said that it was the crack C5 that was being blended, and that was what was being released.
Crack C5 was being blended with light naphtha.
Yeah.
So it was half of the story people were seeing because they didn't really understand. Like I've explained to you, there's production of light naphtha, okay, and just also production of kerosene, and also production of diesel.
All right, Ayo's got questions for you. Ayo, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I'm going to start from what you talked about, Chamberlain, when you were asking about the operating capacity. If you don't mind, so you want to expatiate a little further on what it means to operate at 70%. What's the advantage and what are the risks? Now, this question is coming at the heels of what some people have said, some also members of your society, as we have also heard earlier, that it is not sustainable and it is not, the refinery is not sustainable and that the refinery is not profitable. So if it's operating at a 70%, operating capacity at this moment is 70% according to the NNPCL, what does that mean? How sustainable is that in the long run, and how profitable is that refinery as a result?
In our view, profitability of the refinery will be determined more by having all the process units running, okay? Because when you bring in crude oil, you are paying for the crude oil. And then just imagine in your mind that you produce some LPG, you produce some gasoline, you produce some diesel, you produce some fuel oil. It is when you sell all of these products profitably that you make enough money compared with what it costs you to pay for the crude oil that you brought into the plant. So our view actually is that the refinery will become more profitable when all the process units are running. Now, for the old refinery, that means getting the catalytic reforming unit back into operation ASAP, because that is when you really begin to make money. Then the next answer to your question will be, the higher the capacity at which you operate, the more money you make, because then you are selling more products and you are getting more revenue and optimizing. The strict answer is you must optimize the value of all the products that you make. So have all your units operating and then go up to a higher capacity. You improve your margin. I should add something more. You must be able to evacuate efficiently all what you are producing. That is also important.
Interesting angle there, that last point that you just made, because there is also the issue of, okay, exactly how much market share does the PH refinery have? At least the one you call the old one that is operational right now. To the best of our understanding, it's a 60,000 barrels per day capacity refinery operating right now at 70%. You may want to give us the numbers, what that implies, and how much of the market share of our petroleum products that refinery is supplying. That is coming at the heels of what we've heard Mr. Bismarck Ruwani say, that that's just about plus or minus 5% of the market share, market supply of PMS and a number of other products. So speak to us about that.
That is indeed very correct. Like you have rightly said, the capacity at 100% of the old refinery is just 60,000 barrels per day. When we had all the four refineries operating, their combined capacity was 445,000 barrels per day equivalent. So at the time that they were running efficiently, they were meeting all the needs of the country at that time. And this was back in 2005. They were meeting all the needs of the refinery and continued to meet it up till about 2010. But then gradually we had to start importing more. But if you go back to that 2010, for example, when the refineries were meeting all of our local demand, if they were all operating at 100%, then you will see that the small old Port Harcourt refinery, the contribution to that was really less than 10% at that time. But now, when the demand has even grown further, it's less than 5%. So it's not going to make a significant impact, but it is something because it reduces what we need to import. Fortunately, we have the Dangote refinery, which has started operation and with a capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. So indeed, we will see a situation where we should be able to meet all of our local demand. But let us not forget that the Dangote refinery was built as an export refinery. So if all the four local refineries begin to operate, then we will be in a situation where we can concentrate what they are producing on meeting local demand. Then the balance will be met by Dangote, and then Dangote will export a lot. And by exporting a lot, we will then earn more foreign exchange, which will be good for our economy. And hopefully that should lead to improvement of the value of the Naira.
Well, there's also one criticism that's come at the heels of this refinery that we're celebrating, that it hadn't operated in 25 years, and consequently, it's not sustainable, that it might have some issues, over time. Maybe that is one of the issues that, you would want to speak to. You've run that refinery before, so you can give us some backstory about some of these claims and what needs to be. First of all, the understanding, is it true I hadn't operated for 25 years until now?
The old Port Harcourt refinery was commissioned in 1965 and ran until the new Port Harcourt refinery was completed in 1989 and continued to run after that. There was a fire that happened in 1989, so the refinery was out for a short while, and then it came back into operation at about 1991 and continued running right up to 2000s and thereabouts. So if you say that indeed it has not been running for the past 25 years, that's not quite correct. But anyway, probably 20 years might be more like it. But that shows you one serious issue, that it has been down for so long. So we should compliment, indeed, those who have succeeded in bringing it back into operation, because it means that it's taken a lot of effort. Any refinery plant which has been down for 20 years would necessarily have developed a lot of problems here and there. It's like a car which has not run for 20 years. You want to bring it back into operation, you need to do a lot of work. And that is why when it was finally ready to run and they attempted running it, the reports we got was that, there were initial hitches and they had to go and fix this thing that was leaking because over the years, corrosion has taken place. So indeed, we should compliment those who have been able to bring this plant back into operation. Now, that is the same thing that happens anytime a refinery is down. This is why normally, like I said earlier, a refinery is designed to keep running and never down. You only shut down a refinery for turnaround maintenance after 2 or 3 years, and you start it up again within 45 days so that the refinery keeps running. And as long as it's running, you encounter fewer problems. But once it is shut down for a long time, then you have challenges when you try to start it up.
Okay.
So really, we should compliment those who have succeeded in bringing it back up, but then challenge that. Let's make it more sustainable. Put it in the hands of. Let's privatize it.
Well, there's something that you said earlier. The first statement you made was about trust. That the government it's difficult for people to trust whatever comes from any government source. As you also rightly said, the NNPCL is an organization owned by Nigerians being held in trust by the federal government. So it's only natural that to a significant extent when people talk about anything that comes from government, there is that doubt. How do we build that trust back? So I mean, when you hear, I mean, when in the build up to this, I can imagine, I mean, having, you speaking about with passion about people who continue to express stuff that they understand and stuff that they don't understand. And then you are just bemused because you know what happens to be. So how do we begin to build that trust back between the government, the NNPCL and the people? Because as you said, we have a 440,000 capacity number of refineries, and here we are struggling with trust with the smallest capacity refinery.
Let us all, as Nigerians, commit to speak the truth, and let us have the commitment to do what is best for our nation. The challenge we are having a lot of times is people tend to look at things in terms of what's in it for me. But if we look at things in terms of what is best for our nation, then maybe from that perspective, we will talk differently. If there is a challenge we are facing, let's say we are having this challenge, rather than the attitude of, we're on top of it, and you don't explain that you're having a challenge. You say you're on top of it, and yet you're having a challenge. People know you're having a challenge, but you say I'm on top of it, they say, I don't think this guy is saying the truth.
I mean, I want to be able to get, what you said while you were talking to Aya there about, years of non-operation and some of the, because what we heard, one of the rumors that we heard over the weekend really was that they were not churning out any products and there were issues going on. But what we heard from the management of the refineries, there are technical issues, and they're trying to solve these technical issues to enhance capacity. And then we started hearing from Ipman saying that the cost is about 60 naira more of the product, that is 60 naira more than what they were getting from Dangote. And these rumors continued over the weekend, just so we can get some kind of clarification on this entire drama and stop all the rumor mongering that we see online. Some clarification on what it is that's happened, some of the technical issues that they said they were sorting out, and this pricing issue.
Technical issues, like I said, when you start up an old plant, you are inevitably going to face challenges. Pumps, you need sparing of the pumps. If a pump breaks down and you need to fix it, then of course it affects your ability to churn out your products. What we hear, because when we had that comment, we tried to verify what was going on, was that they had some challenges with their loading pumps, which they needed to deal with, so that they could be able to blend the light naphtha and the cracked C5 and be able to transfer to the loading bay. Many people are not aware the refinery is actually separate from the depot. Yes, the depot is under a different body. Okay, now so the refinery has to do its own blend, transfer to the tanks of the depot. Then the depot will now load out. So that transfer, there was some hitch, and so what we will expect is that they have solved that problem now, so they should be able to resume loading at the depot. I believe that it should be possible to verify, stations that have received products, and from what the question you asked, it means that there was loading taking place, and then the loading seemed to have stopped at the time, and then people concluded that the refinery had shut down anymore. But it's this transfer I believe that as we see them get that refinery back very stable and all things working, we should see a smoother operation. We hope that what the government has announced about intending to privatize the refineries, that they really deliver on it.
Will it really impact pricing?
Pricing is actually a function of what it costs you to produce and what it costs you to pay for the crude oil. Many people do not know that in actual fact, the price of crude oil accounts for almost 80% of your OPEX. Okay?
Crude oil, the one that we have locally.
But the crude oil belongs to the federal government of Nigeria, not to the refinery. You have to make that distinction. The refinery, this is why if it becomes a private enterprise, then there will be more accountability. Because the
price will not be impacted.
The price will be impacted eventually, because once there is more accountability and more efficiency, then the refiner who produces at a lower cost will be able to sell it at a lower cost, and the public will go and buy from the stations that are lifting from that refinery.
But you know, when I say that, I mean, I know you know that for the average person out there, yes, this is how it works in terms of those separation of powers. But they say, look, we're in this country, this crude belongs to us. So whatever you do over there, all they want to hear and see and know and experience from the pumps is
available and lower price. That's it. That's it.
But you say it's not that simple.
Unfortunately, it's a cost to us as a nation. Let's be honest with ourselves. Okay, it's a cost to us as a nation. Let's look at the overall efficiency. Honestly, in Europe, in the US, and in Asia, the governments give subsidies to industry so as to enable them compete out there in the world. Okay, if you go to Europe, for example, around Easter time, winter time, when the cost of heating goes up for most people, the government steps in and says, hey, you can't charge more than this. In the UK, they have what they call off-gen, that regulates price of gas that is supplied to homes so that people can heat their homes and be able to not die during the winter. So there is a cap on how much they can charge the customers. Now, our government, should look at the entire gamut of the things that we as a nation need to do and decide how to deploy its resources. Right now, Nigeria is borrowing massively. Our debt servicing is higher than 90%. So that means we actually don't have a lot of money to play around with. That's the honest truth.
I want to be able to, because our correspondent in Port Harcourt, you just sent us a message right now, and he says, and I'm going to quote him exactly, he says, the loading depot is controlled by Nigerian Petroleum Storage Company, NPSC, and he said it was functional when I went there yesterday.
Great.
So that answers you.
Okay,
so for that refinery, the old Port Harcourt refinery versus the new one, or maybe not versus the new one. So if and when the new one comes on stream, what kind of impact is it going to have? What will we see and how do we feel that impact?
It will be very significant because the two refineries will have a combined capacity of 210,000 barrels per day. It will be very significant because it's able to supply, it can meet the needs of most of the southern part of the country. And then let's envisage a situation where the Warri refinery also comes into operation. There's a pipeline from Warri refinery that links up to Kaduna refinery. You can send crude up to Kaduna refinery, and then they will be able to supply even the northern part of the country. So we will see a massive increase. If the 5,000 kilometers of distribution facilities are brought back into operation, you will see a massive improvement in our nation. Because right now, our roads are failing. Many people don't know that the roads are failing, principally because of the axle load that goes on those loads. When these tankers are loaded, the load, the impact on the roads is massive. So they lead to,
takes us back to refineries.
Yes.
I mean, the pipelines.
Yeah, pipelines.
So if we can get the pipelines up and running, even if it's privatized, it takes off that pressure from the roads and possibly...
And then our infrastructure will become more efficient.
All right. We do thank you for coming on this morning. Anthony Owigwe is the president, Nigeria Society of Chemical Engineers. That's why he was here. But he's also served as a former MD of Port Harcourt Refining Company, also former GED Refineries and Petrochemicals by NPC. Thank you very much.
After many allegations, many talk come out for Rivers State, say nothing like crude production they go on for PH Refinery. NNPC don't bust out, come let us know, say now lie they talk. Say production they go on for the refinery. No say Nigeria not trust NNPC because they don't promise and face severally. Understand? They don't promise us one time I say deadline of say the refinery will come on stream for so time. When they don't face severally, so Nigeria not trust them again. So now they struggle to prove point. Say yes, the refinery they on board.